We were having a conversation today in our Discord about Left 4 Dead and some perceptions of people's reaction to playing it, and especially at launch, and then kind of how that snowballed into like how we thought about the Anacrusis and some stuff. And so there's some stuff to learn here. There's some mistakes made, maybe. Yeah. I have got no fancy graphics if you want to just put something else on. I'm just going to talk for a little bit here. But so one of the interesting things is always when you release a game, or just not even release, just play a game, is everybody's got their perception of how the game is played. And it's always localized, right? So it's however you and your friends play it, you go, oh, that's how everybody plays it. And that's just not true, but I understand why people do it, right? So, you know, when Left 4 Dead was released, it's like, oh, everybody's going to play this on expert really quickly, or everybody plays it this way. Everybody played versus, nobody played co-op or whatever, even though we only had 2 of the versus maps or episodes released. But the reality is, it was played differently. That it was played co-op overwhelmingly, like 80% of the play sessions were co-op. When we added survival mode in the spring, that just intensified it, and that had like 25% of the play sessions were in survival mode, which was interesting because when we were originally doing it, we were rushed to do it. We had very little resources to work on it, just because there's a lot of other things going on. Yeah, there's a sequel thing. But so me and Carrie and another artist worked on it for a brief period and kind of came up with something that we were comfortable with shipping, and we liked it. I had originally played some of the holdout mode in Gears of War, and that had a kind of a different feel to it, and we didn't have the same tool set that they had, but we had something different in how we can kind of collapse and combine things. And so ours did not have a clean ending. It was times you went for. If you haven't played it, you can still play it. It's fun. But at times you'd go for, and those would eventually, you'd get different medals or rewards for the different times. And it's worked really well for a lot of the mod stuff too, is we just played the Toys and I think Toys 2 the other day. A really good survival mode map if you ever want to play it on Left 4 Dead 2. But so we had known the players at that point already. We'd played enough that we understood this co-op and kind of the setup. And I remember one of the engineers wanting that we should put in the ability to save your setup. But no. Screwing around during the setup was half the time. It was playing a house. It was goofing around. It was seeing what you got that random thing and building it out. And, you know, some of the feedback we'd gotten about it just going on and not having a clean ending, people weren't fans of. And then they saw the player numbers and understood the restrictions we had. And they were like, yeah, okay, whatever. That was pretty good for that. So that was okay. We liked that. We built on that. Honestly, in the Anacrusis, we come back and we cap it. We put times on it, and it's wave based. But ignore that for a second. But the other perception was, especially as we got to Left 4 Dead 2, is everybody's like, oh, everybody's played that on expert. They either played versus or they played expert. So first, Left 4 Dead 2, same thing, same split, co-op predominantly. And then, again, it's off like the top of my head. I don't have the stats in front of me. I don't have access to them anymore. And we've talked about this, so this is not me leaking stuff. But essentially it was normal was number one. To just be clear, anything you make as your default settings will be the most played thing always. You'll always get some guy and be like, oh, well, everybody downloads this thing and they run. No, they don't. Everybody plays with the default whatever. Default key binding, default video settings, default audio, default. And so most people just played it that way, right? And so with that though, so with Left 4 Dead 2, that was, again, we saw default difficulty, and then it was advanced, and then it was easy, and then it was expert. So more people actually played it on easy than on expert. And that was even like right before I left in 2016-17, that was played that way. And expert's just a certain challenge, and you really need to have 4 people, and it's got to be really controlled, and like you don't have it always. Versus, I was surprised though, leaving that. I liked realism versus because that added a lot of difficulty to it, and you really had to coordinate as a team, but that never took off. That never caught on. And I took some bad learnings from that. So we have that. And then we also have the other thing is people played it a lot solo. Dylan, the voice of Nick, he knew the game because he sat in his trailer alone off the internet and played it. And that's how he experienced it on the Xbox. And so a lot of people played it that way. And so for the Anacrusis, we made sure there's a bunch of solo stuff you can do, including in versus. Okay, but here's where things change and where I get into trouble. So as we were starting the studio, I talked to a lot of other developers, and I talked a lot about starting studio. I didn't talk about the game we were making. I didn't talk about changing and seeing what people were seeing changing in the world. I just thought about like, oh, well, I know what I want to make. I'm going to make that. Let's talk about payroll. Let's talk about bonuses. Let's talk about healthcare. Let's talk about HR stuff. These are all the things that I would talk to like my group of friends. But I'd kind of missed something that was happening, and that was it was okay for co-op and to be harder and versus to be harder. And so Conflog, I knew there's a mod for for Left 4 Dead that makes versus harder. And it does it in a way that I'm not a fan of, but I understand that they're doing the best that they can with the tools that they have. And so sure, fine, that works. Right? But it's still the problem that the survivors are meant to live, and that just creates this toxic environment where if you don't survive, you're going to get kicked and people are going to yell at you. And it's just bad, right? So those are some things I knew eventually would do with the Anacrusis versus, but first we were going to launch the Anacrusis and not worry about versus because we were just going to be about co-op. So mistake one, we should have had versus in there because it was clear that that's where people were heading and wanting to play, and I should have lifted my head up and understood that. The second was, and I know this deep in my heart, I know this well, and I knew this when we were talking about it, but we ran into a problem. We ran into that while testing our game was just too hard. It was overwhelmingly too hard. I've said this before, we had hardcore first-person shooter nearby devs come in and not get out of the first hallway, kind of too hard. It was just too hard. So that made us get behind on some of the things we needed to do with the game. And so we had the director for the Anacrusis is so much more complicated and involved than the Left 4 Dead director. The Left 4 Dead director is literally like 3 random timers. But it just works because it's about pacing. It's not about reacting. We wanted to add the reacting to the player so that it got harder or easier when the player played and how they played. The problem is, and I know this. I shouldn't be hitting my chest and go on the microphone, but I know this. Players won't perceive that. No player will understand that. They'll only understand their localized experience of either difficulty of making it harder or easier. They'll never understand that change. And then when it came out, nobody understood that, how it reacted to you and how it would ramp up against you. So much so that we actually kind of teased some of that out and then gave you discrete difficulty levels just because that was clearer in people's heads. And so then we just didn't have verses though. And so then by the time we got to verses, people didn't care because they dismissed our game. And I get that. There's a lot of games out there. I am not some person that you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to their next thing. I'm just a dude working with a team, and people just didn't care. They're like, whatever, you added verses. That's cool. But the thing is, some people started playing verses and realized, oh, this is different. This is about the survivors dying and the aliens winning. And we amped it up that way, and we gave you a bunch of tools to do that. And then we even took it further, is you can actually do settings where you can put there to have faster spawns so that the aliens really romp. Now, as people who play versus a lot, we still play it a lot, right, in our community. And that's how we play it. Because it's just way more amped up, it's way more crazy, it's way more intense. And that's kind of the default game mode now. But now, if you're going to be new coming into the game, we won't play it that way with you. We'll play the regular because it's just too much. But, so that's where that came. And by the way, I know our menu system's hard, and you miss that middle bar is actually a settings thing, and you could click on it, and you can make changes. We went with the way that Fortnite did it. Again, that's my failure. That's an argument I lost. I find our menu confusing. That's a sad thing to say, right? But there you go. At this point, why don't you? I fix it because the investment to redo all of that, we're not going to see back. And so what we try to do is work with what we have and try to inform people. And so that's what I'm doing now. Hey, click that middle menu bar. There's all kinds of things you can do. And one of them is you can play versus. And actually, this is a top level menu choice. So you find this. You can play versus against bots, because that was one of the things we saw is if you want to play co-op single player, you're going to want to play versus single player as well. So we got that right. Right, so we got that right. They added the difficulty. You can actually put it where there's no spawn timer. So if you ever complain in Left 4 Dead that the zombies take too long to spawn, man, crank it up here, and you can put no spawn timer. It's just chaos, and it's fun. So where we are with the game now, I'm happy about. But I didn't realize how little people would care that that's true, and that is a hard thing to be honest with yourself about. But that's the truth. So that is where we are today. We've learned a bunch. We've made a bunch of adjustments. Where we are with the game is good, but how we got to the game is not took too long, blah, 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 blah. So this isn't an ad for the game. I'm just trying to talk about if you are making a game, you got to make sure that you're lifting your head up all the time. And I talk about lifting my head up all the time too, right? But the current trends and making sure we should have been like, hey, we need to get verses in here first. There was problems there as well of just money-wise, our resources, the people we had. Like, it just wasn't going to probably happen in a clean way anyways. But if we would have spent the time on that over our version of survival mode, holdout mode, would probably been better invested. Yeah, you learn. Here's the crappy thing in life as you get older. You never stop learning. Oh, God. I wish I knew everything. But there we are. So with that, this is the one thing I will say about our game and about sales is next week we're going to do a sale. We're going to do a crazy sale, 75% off. The game's going to be like $2.49 or something. And that is to be priced to what the key sellers are selling it for. Now, when you normally, there's a little additional content. When you sell Humble Bundle, they're not supposed to resell their keys, but everybody does. We know who's doing that, but we're okay with it. It's fine. It's just, I'm not going to beg on somebody for doing that. They just want to play our game. That's cool. I'm glad they are. If I could give our game away for free and keep making enough money to keep making games, I would do it. But I don't know how to do that. That's why I keep asking about weird financial stuff. But that is where we are. But so we are going to price it as cheap as the keys that you could buy at other sites. If you want to buy it, pick it up. That's cool. If not, as well, you don't have to do that. I'm bad at salesmen. My dad was a salesman. Like, when you live with a salesman, you get really sick of that, always constantly trying to sell. So I'm just trying to talk about where we are and what's going on. But so to wrap it back to the beginning is there's that perception of how people play the game and, we'll hear dead game. And yeah, it is a dead game in the sense of if you are going to go jump on and not talk to anybody and just see how many games are out there, there's not a lot of games out there. There's some, but not a lot. But if you come to our Discord and you say, hey, you want to play, you'll find games. And so we're kind of a quiet, kind of social, kind of hanging out game. And I'm kind of okay with that. Like, it's done what it's done. I'm not going to sit here and try to be like, at first I would have been worried about saying how it's doing or mistakes because I wanted to present this, oh, it's all great, it's all perfect. But the reality is, it is what it is. And I'm okay with that. And people will still play it. We play it all the time. We're playing it tonight. Somebody made a new mod that we're going to play, that they're versus mod. Some people start making versus focus mods, which is kind of exciting. So like, it's still being supported that way. We're still playing it. Sorry, I'm watching the Guardians game. I can't even care enough about selling to you guys. You'll meet the love of your life playing our game. I don't know. But no, so like there's still people doing cool stuff in it and we'll keep supporting it and do stuff. We actually did an update to our mod tools to include some stuff that had kind of stuck through the cracks. So yeah, there's a land statue now. So like we keep supporting it that way as we can. And yeah, so you're supposed to do videos that tell you to buy things the day that they're available because no one remembers to. You can wish list it. I guess that'll remind you. But honestly, again, if the game price, if the reason why you're not buying it is because it's $9.99 today and it's $2.49 tomorrow or next week, and that's only because like you just don't have the money, like I would rather you buy the key site. I'd rather I can't pirate it, I don't think. Otherwise I'd say do that. Like if it's between like buying our game and going on a date, go on a date. But equally, I'd like to be able to keep supporting it and keep going. So, again, yeah, put it on itch and just let people pay what they want might be a thing to do. Not going to do that before next week. But, something to think about for me. I don't want to do more work, though. I do more work. I do buy a lot of stuff on itch. Yeah. So also we're going to be playing the Anacrusis a bunch this week to get screenshots. I'm working on the new video, doing some of that kind of fun stuff just for the sale next week. If you stuck around this long, should we theme this about friends and family? Because it's a kind of friends and family discount, or is this the pool party? Even though we'll be part of the summer sale as well. This is kind of a quieter sale because it's just us and it's just about rewarding people that we're already talking with. I don't know. I am babbling now. But thanks for listening. I do appreciate it. I do like doing these videos. I actually make this video separate than the TikTok video, which is more, yeah, because you got to do that there. The kids need the energy. The kids need the energy. Here we're all just mellow and hanging out.